Welcome back to The Doctor Is In with Dr. Nadia Sabeh. I'm Dana Swadan, Dr. Sabeh's producer. This episode is part of our What Plants Crave series, where Dr. Sabeh speaks with growers, researchers, and other experts in controlled environment agriculture to get their insights about the direction of the industry and, of course, what exactly it is that plants crave. On today's episode, we're speaking to Michelle Keller of Living Greens Farm. Michelle grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and was active in Future Farmers of America in middle school through college. After Michelle graduated with a plant biology degree from the University of Wisconsin, she also completed all coursework in the Plant Pathology program from the University of Minnesota. From 2003 to 2013, Michelle was the owner and operator of LaBore Farms hydroponic lettuce. In 2013, Michelle started full-time at Living Greens Farm as head grower with accountability for research and development of production systems. This includes recipe development, systems development, and production parameters for baby greens, herbs, teen lettuce, and full-size lettuce. Thank you for listening.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nadia Sabeh. I'm the president and founder of Dr. Greenhouse, and you are listening to our podcast, What Plants Crave. Today's guest is Michelle Keller, who is the head grower of Living Greens, an indoor lettuce farm located in Faribault, Minnesota. Hi, Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm good. And yourself?
I'm great. It's so great to have you on our What Plants Crave podcast. I'm really excited to learn more about you, about the plants you grow, and about living greens and this crazy industry that we're in of indoor agriculture. So first I want to just ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, about Living Greens. What got you interested in horticulture in the first place and growing indoors?
Well, I graduated with a plant biology degree back when hydroponics and aeroponics weren't even a thing yet. So I am dating myself a little bit. But I knew at that point I was interested in growing food for people. I had no interest in growing flowers for commercial purposes except for myself. I really wanted some way, somehow, to make an impact on the commercial production of some type of food. I just hadn't figured out what yet when I graduated from college. I did spend a couple of years working for the USDA, but still wanted to work more closely with plant production. So I opened my own greenhouse in 2003. That was an NFT system, hydroponics. It was a crop king system, and I grew for 9 years, growing leafy greens and basil. One man shop, so I was the grower, the salesperson, delivery person, you name it. I did everything, and we closed that 9 years after I started, and I began working at Living Greens Farm about a month and a half after I closed my doors it's called LaBore Farms, and I've been working at Living Greens on and off since. I started as a part-time person at Living Greens because back then they didn't really have full-time employees yet, and became basically the head grower after a couple of years. You wanted to know what we did at Living Greens.
Yeah.
Well, in the beginning, it was all about proving a concept. We wanted to be able to prove that aeroponics can commercially viably produce a product and figure out the recipes that would be needed to do that product. And so I'm in charge of the research and development of all the products at Living Greens. And when we settled on, okay, we are going to do processed, chopped, bagged lettuce, my job was to make sure that the products got to the point where we can chop, wash, dry before they're bagged for a kit ready to eat.
Yeah, so how did Living Greens even get started in the first place? Like, whose brainchild was this that they wanted to prove this concept, and who was smart enough to hire you?
The original brainchild was our original CEO, Dana Anderson. He wanted to figure out how to commercially grow aeroponically. And he saw in the newspaper that I was selling LaBore Farms and a woman was buying LaBore Farms. And so he called me up and said, hey, I see that you're a grower. You have some experience in this space. I could really use some experience at the farm. I don't have anybody growing that has experience. I have 2 college kids in the grow rooms. Can you come and help us out? And so for the last 8 or so years, I've been all about developing the different products. We didn't end up on chopped romaine and chopped butter right away. We went through quite a few iterations. We went through quite a few generations of systems to get to where we are now. And we just stayed very small. We call it stealth mode, if you will, because we wanted to make sure that we figured it out first before we went bigger. And so we did every single herb you can think of. I've done corn, I've done wheat, I've done
Oh my God.
peppers, I've done strawberries. And we kept on coming back to lettuce. One, because I had 8 years of experience, 9 years of experience in it already. But two, we saw that was the best market right now. Back in 2014, 2015, the aeroponic industry hadn't launched yet. Neither did the hydroponic industry. But we saw that all these players were out there. What could make ourselves different? And we decided the chopped market. Going into the store, buying that kit with the salad dressing, the cheese, and the croutons already into the bag, and you have a kit bag. What do you have to do to produce that? Well, you have to have a lettuce strong enough to be able to go through the chop process. That was my job. That was my goal, is to find romaine strong enough, large enough, butter strong enough and large enough, and all the different ingredients that we have in the pipeline for all of our different kits for when we do expand.
That seems like a really unique niche for what you guys do, to have salad kits. I mean, I do feel like there's other indoor farmers that are doing chopped lettuces, but this is a specific market that I haven't seen too much of from the vertical farming community.
Yes. One of our uniqueness, and I don't know if we're the only, but unique properties of us, is that our processing shop is within the same 4 walls of our growing shop. So my grow rooms and my processing rooms share walls, which means that I have to keep my operation at GAP and GMP standards and pass all the Primus audits that we go through every year to make sure that we pass all of the areas so we can sell across state lines into these different customers.
That's so interesting. I feel like there's some vertical farmers who are growing whole heads that don't necessarily need to meet such rigorous control standards.
I'm not going to speak for them.
Yeah. Smart. So, I mean, what did you think originally? I mean, here you came from a greenhouse, growing leafy greens and culinary herbs, and then you're asked to go inside 4 walls with, electric lighting. Did you think that this was a genius idea or a crazy idea?
I had already been using supplemental lighting in my greenhouse. I live in Minnesota. There is no way you can grow lettuce without supplemental lighting for part of the season. So the benefit that I found right away by going inside was that complete control of the environment. When you go inside, you're giving the plant the chance to reach that genetic potential by providing all the necessary ingredients that those plants need. Indoor temperatures, don't matter what the outside looks like because you control it inside. The greenhouse offers that fabulous advantage of free sunlight. However, you can't control that sunlight. And I found that out a lot. In the summer, you have too much sun. And if you're in Minnesota like I am in the winter, you don't have enough. And so the greenhouse has to be engineered to be able to accommodate both the hottest of the summers and the coldest of the winters, with most of the time compromising for economics to be able to get your product out. Being indoors, you can eliminate that compromise. And you also eliminate all those spikes, either in temperature or yield, because you can keep that temperature, humidity, and light all the same month after month after month. Okay. I think that in greenhouses, you can get a beautiful spike in the summertime when you have all that extra sunlight, but you are going to slow down in the winter unless you have an insane amount of supplemental lighting to help you achieve the same results that you get in the summertime, which is probably not financially possible. I think that being indoors is the best way to be able to have a head of lettuce be the same every day of the month, every month of the year.
Why is that important?
People like consistency. So when you are selling to a larger supplier, you want to be able to provide them the same type of quality every week when you deliver to them. So if they have an order of 200 cases every week, you want to be able to consistently give them quality product at that 200 case count every single week of the year to make sure that you maintain your contract.
I was going to say, yeah, what happens if you don't?
I was not able to lock contracts during my greenhouse days. However, that is already 9 years ago, right? So we're also in a different era at that point.
Okay.
Right. But in the wintertime, I had to condense. I couldn't sell to all my customers anymore in the wintertime because I had lack of light because I'm in Minnesota versus being somewhere else in the country. And then in the summertime, I sometimes threw away product because I didn't have a place to sell it because everybody in Minnesota can sell.
You were competing against everybody else. Yeah.
For about 8 weeks of the year, versus if you have a contract, you can state, I will supply you through November through March, but you have to purchase the same amount March through August or whatever it is. And that kind of just makes the market be very level. And then they know that it doesn't matter what day of the month that you're giving them that product, it's going to be the same quality because it was grown in the same way.
Right. So what would be your reduction or increase in production from like summer to winter in a greenhouse? I mean, at least percentage wise, like were you 50% of what in the winter, what you could produce in the summer, or?
I think it was about a 30% loss, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So it was the most expensive time to grow because you had to heat that greenhouse,
right.
Again, Minnesota. And I sometimes went down to -10 degrees and I have a plastic greenhouse that's, double poly plastic greenhouse that you have to keep above freezing at some point. And at some point you have heaters going, but if it's -15 degrees and you're trying to hit even a temperature of 50 degrees, that's a 65 degree differential. That was hard to maintain. So sometimes I'd walk into my greenhouse and it's like 40, 45 degrees with all the heaters just blowing away in the middle of January. You're going to take a yield hit at that point or a quality hit. Versus if you stay somewhere that you can give the plants the temperatures they want at all times, you can keep that yield and that quality the same over and over and over again.
Right. Would you also ventilate the greenhouse for humidity control, or did you have to deal too much with humidity with your lettuce plants?
No, you had to ventilate in the wintertime to just make sure that your CO2 burners and all your burners didn't accumulate any gases you didn't want, and you had to get rid of that you had to get rid of the oxygen, and so you could bring in more CO2, if you will. So my computers opened 2 small fans every 5 minutes for about 30 seconds. And a lot of times in the morning, I'm taking a baseball bat to the fins to knock off the ice. So the louvers would open back up because you'd freeze over in the nighttime. By the time I was done, I had a continuous flow fan instead that was just really slow.
Yeah.
It always can just continuously float, and you just watched all your heat go out of your bubble that you just spent all this money heating up to keep your production year round. It was a very challenging. I would never give it up though. That was one of the things that really taught me that I'm in the right profession. I wanted to grow food. I wanted to, increase people's lives by giving them a healthier option. And I've always been a pesticide-free grower. That was the first thing I decided on day one. I am not going to put pesticides. I'm not going to get my pesticide license. I had it for the US government when I was working for them, and I'm not going to renew it. I let it expire. If I have to ever do anything, I will shut down first, figure out what's wrong, and reopen.
So is it easier to manage pests in your indoor farm than it was in a greenhouse?
Oh, totally. Totally. I'm going to knock on wood. Once in a blue moon, we get a mosquito or something in our grow rooms. But so far, we haven't seen any agricultural pests inside the grow rooms ever. As I said, knocking on wood on that one. Yes.
So so you went through all these different crops in the at Living Greens, and you said consumers wanted the lettuce plants, but I mean, you even tried growing wheat and corn. A lot of people have said that, growing our cereal grains is an effort not worth attempting in a vertical farm because the inputs would be too great for the quantity of wheat and corn and grains that we would want to produce. Did you guys find that was true, or do you think that's a real concern, or do you think we could be growing?
I think there's truly crops that have been mastered in other arenas that indoor grow would not benefit them much. We grew the wheats and the corns just to say we did.
Cool.
We even grew potatoes just so we could say we did it and moving on.
Okay.
We didn't do it for any commercial aspects or anything like that. We just wanted to see how tall we could get that corn stalk going on an A-frame And if we could get it to tassel, could we get it actually to, get an ear on that? Can we get the wheat to tassel? I never got corn on the corn because I didn't have any bees or any way to pollinate way up
pollination.
There. Yes.
Yes.
The pollination got me.
On that note, though, I mean, that's one of the benefits of growing leafy greens, right, and culinary herbs indoors. You don't have to worry about pollination. When you guys were growing your vine crops, were you releasing bees into the farm?
No, I was releasing a Q-tip in my fingers.
That is a lot of work.
We never grew anything that fruited commercially. So when we did the small things in our old days of going through the different R&D, what do we want to be? How do we want to grow up? What is living greens going to look like in the future? And we grew all these crops. We only did 4 or 5 plants of each in its own system to see what it did, how it produced, what could it viably do. Yes, no, check it off the box and move on. So we never really grew anything that was fruiting in a commercial sense. Even my strawberries, when I grew strawberries, I think I had 30 plants total. And we just took a Q-tip every morning and pollinated in the morning and then pollinated at night before we left.
Can you help our listeners understand what is aeroponics and how does it differ from hydroponics? What are the benefits? What do you guys like about aeroponics?
The Greek definition of aeroponics means working air, right? And so you're using the air to be what you want it, making it work for you. For example, if you have the roots in an air situation and you mist it with some nutrient water and you're giving it everything it needs in that nice little spa-like splash of water, if you will, and then you allow the roots to do what they're supposed to do. They see water, you have the cations and anions, you have all the different conductivities of the water being absorbed into the plant and going up through the plant and doing what it needs to do. But then those roots dry out a little bit and have the potential to draw in the oxygen they need. And they dry out just a little bit. And they say, oh, I'm a little bit dry. I'm going to create more of a root mass so I can grab that water when it comes around again. And I know when it's coming. Plants can tell time, right? They know when it's morning, they know when it's night. And I know that water's coming. So if I feather out my roots just a little bit more and create this better mass, I'll be able to absorb that water just a little bit faster every time I get it. And that way I can bring more to the top and have more production on the top. So aeroponics is truly putting the roots into an air system and just being fogged, mist, splash, however when you phrase it, whichever type of aeroponics you're using, versus hydroponics, the roots are somehow in some way underwater somewhere, whether it's NFT and you have the water going down the channel, or you have deep water hydroponics, some of the roots are underwater. At that point, those roots have to create that extra barrier that they need so they don't drown, if you will, and I'm air quoting the drown, because they can't absorb water at that point. They can't absorb the air molecules that they need, because plants breathe through their roots, exhale through their leaves when they're in water. And so a lot of like NFT, which is what I used to use, nutrient film technique, I would have the roots in the water, but then I'd always have these really feathery roots that were just above the water channel, or an aeroponic root system inside of a hydroponic root system so they could actually breathe. So we just made the best of both worlds. We took what the plant wants. It wants the nutrients, but it still has to breathe, and married the two and found that when we find that perfect ratio of watering and air cycling and the plant is very happy, you get a totally different root development system and you see yields like you would there's no tomorrow.
That is so interesting. So okay, if I compared NFT to aeroponics, I mean, I don't think it's going to matter on what crop you're growing. Do you adjust the concentration or ratio of nutrients? And if this is proprietary, stop me. But I'm just curious, like, just what you described, that if roots are always inundated, or always in water with hydroponics, and constantly being fed nutrients and always exposed to that nutrient dense water, fertigation water, as opposed to aeroponics where you just described like the roots are going to feather out, they want to gobble up that water when it's ready to happen, you know, they're happy and oxygenated. I mean, does that also sort of translate into nutrients? Like for NFT, would maybe you have a lower nutrient concentration because it's always flowing through the roots, where aeroponics you might have a higher concentration so that when the plants receive it, it's like going to receive it in bulk?
I can only say that we have a very different fertigation program than hydroponics.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's fine. So it's not the same.
It is not the same. No,
Yeah.
I started because I had all this knowledge of hydroponics with NFT.
Mm-hmm.
So I started with a basic NFT recipe and then just modified it over the years to what we are today.
Okay. So you're a believer in aeroponics. Obviously, you're all in now.
Right? Yes. I feel that there is room for all. So like, I don't think that I could do any better than the hydroponic tomato growers. They got that. They perfected that. That is fabulous. I was one of the first people, I'm not the first, but I was one of the first people to grow commercially hydroponic lettuce. This is a very young industry. There's so many things that can be taught and learned and improved on that hydroponics may have not been the stopping point in the technology mainstream of that product. You know, I feel that hydroponics is a very great start. You don't have as many catch points as you do in aeroponics. If there is something wrong in aeroponics, you don't have as much time to get to that plant and save it as you do in hydroponics.
Right, yeah. Or deep water culture is like the best case, right? Because you always have access to water. Yeah.
You always have access to water. So there's different levels of complexity that you are gaining when you go from hydroponics to aeroponics, but you also have the potential of a higher gain, consistency and reliably using that aeroponics. So it's also a factor of risk too.
So I know that some of our listeners are big fans of soil, living soil. Any thoughts on that? I don't know if you've had any experience growing in the ground, but you know, you just made the comment there's sort of, you know, room for all and all ways to grow. Do you have any thoughts on like what the differences would be with growing those roots in a ground system as opposed to hydroponics or aeroponics?
That is exactly what I'm trying to mimic. In a ground situation, say you put a lettuce plant in the perfect soil. It's aerated. It has just enough air to water ratio in that soil. It rains every 2 to 3 days because you're in the perfect location. Those roots are going to become nice and feathery. That is what we just brought indoors and controlled it. We don't have birds flying overhead or pollution coming down in acid rain. We just took that perfect lettuce.
A hailstorm coming through, fires taking it out. Yeah. So just before we leave lettuce specifically, I mean, you've grown all these different crops. What makes lettuce uniquely lettuce when it comes to growing indoors or in a greenhouse as compared to, say, tomatoes or wheat?
I grow a plant that I also love. I love the flavor and the textures of lettuce. I can taste and smell the different flavor profiles. I grow lettuce because I love lettuce and all the nuances that it can provide when you're growing it. I'm going to go to why do I love plants? Well, plants are mostly lettuce for me. Plants are predictable when you learn to listen to them talk. And I've learned to listen how lettuce talks. So during the course of one of my grow room walks, I have several conversations with the different systems that are in production. No, I'm not actually talking to them. Just, you're going to ask that next. I know that. But I'm listening to what they need, you know, how they're utilizing what they're getting, how I can help facilitate their growth and so on. And so my love of that lettuce stems from the knowledge that I can have a positive or a negative impact on what they're doing. And I'm going to try to positively impact so I can get that look, that taste, that feel that everybody wants at the end of its growing cycle. So one of the things that myself and my grower does with me We do taste tests. What's our acid count on this? We do bricks tests. What is the sugar content? We do
On lettuce?
Yes.
Interesting.
So we do taste tests. What does this stem taste like? We're harvesting this tomorrow. What can we do to sweeten the load on this lettuce before tomorrow? What can we do to make it more crisp or more rigid? When you listen to a plant and you listen to how they're growing, then you can change what they need to have, because I have the ability to do so, and give them what they want. And that I love lettuce because I figured them out probably is that,
Yeah.
I have good conversations with them.
I just have this image in my head of you hugging a lettuce plant right now.
I knew you were going to go somewhere like that. I knew that.
Do you have any photos like that? Because if you don't, when I eventually come visit you, I'm going to force you to take a photo like that.
I do not have any pictures of me hugging my lettuce. I do not, no.
I also want to say that I love that you do take bricks measurements, because I actually really love lettuce too. And since I was in college, my friends, my roommates would make fun of me because I would literally just eat lettuce. I wouldn't even need to dress it or put it in a salad. And while I was making the salad, I would eat the lettuce as I was doing it. Especially like those hard crunchier parts that nobody wants for some reason. Everybody wants like the flimsy leafy part, and I'm like, no, the crunchy part is the sweet part, right? And so I would be eating that while I'm like, anyway. So yeah, my roommates used to call me a rabbit. I love that you love lettuce, because I love lettuce too. So kind of I mean, really a big reason why you're on this podcast, why I asked you to do this with me, is because whenever I talk to you, I learned something new, and I've learned some new things here already. You guys have done a lot of in-house experiments. You continue to do in-house experiments. And I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about why you do these in-house experiments, and what you have learned about the various technologies that are sort of being promoted or used in indoor agriculture. And of course, you don't have to give any secrets away, but I am really curious why you guys take that approach of experimentation. And I mean, you've been in this industry for indoor ag 8 years, with greenhouses 18 years. I mean, what have you seen developed? I mean, what have you tried that was awesome? What did you try that just don't go there? Or like this was snake oil. I don't know.
That was a lot of questions in one statement.
I know it was. Pick and choose from there.
So I'm going to start with why do we do experiments at Living Greens? And I'm going to break it down to a very fun quote. It's all about the better mousetrap, right? If you don't continue to innovate, improve, and try to become better, then you are never going to be the person who gets the best product to market. We are always striving for greater yield and better shelf life. That's why we went indoors. You can make those small changes to the environment and hopefully potentially reap some huge, great rewards. Recipe building is always being done, and that is the key behind of all the experiments that we're doing. And I think the industry is just getting a better understanding of the criticalness of having the correct environment conditions surrounding the plants. So when you find a particular set of conditions, say relative humidity, for a particular variety, you can watch those plants respond on a daily basis to those conditions that you set for them. You can reap an incredible reward that is visually seen by either vibrancy, lack of disease, or you can see a more economic reward in the increased yield. Unfortunately, those conditions change from variety to variety, though. So you have to map each condition for each variety that you're growing. And so you can do that for every variable that you can control indoors: relative humidity, temperature, light, how much airflow, how less airflow, how much CO2, when you put that CO2, how much water, how much EC, what are the different conditions in that EC. As long as you can break things down to the pieces and change them, you're always going to have experiments to do, and you always have a way to make yourself better. That's one of the reasons why we experiment. The one thing I'd say is snake oil in the industry. I can't say there is a single snake oil. I think that our industry is so young that we don't have true snake oil people or technologies yet. We just don't have technologies that have been proven or not been proven. I think that just going to Indoor AgCon this last month or so, you see all these different technologies trying to achieve the same goal. And everybody has the same basic concept. You know, whether or not this person's mind or somebody else becomes snake oil in the future is still yet to be seen, but we're still all so young, you just don't see it. I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting perspective. It's hard to know what is legit and what's not legit until anything is proven or disproven.
Right.
Everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table. This industry has not proven the test of time yet.
That's an awesome perspective. So do you guys track energy and water use and relate it to productivity or profitability?
We do track both water and electrical metrics, part of our COGS. In the facility I'm currently in, we do not have the ability to make any changes to it. We are what we are because we're in a research facility. So the facility I'm in Faribault, we sell commercially, but we're never going to be a large farm at that location. It is a building, it's not a very big building. And we kind of built helter-skelter within the building as we grew into the different research and development stages. So we recognize that you have to do something about water and you have to do something about electricity. So we took those lessons learned and we're opening our first commercial size facility in the Midwest in 2022. I'm hoping to drop seeds in April or May. And there we are already put into capturing the condensate off the HVACs, reusing my tank water, putting it back into use into the building. We own several acres on that site. We're putting in a solar farm to offset our electrical use on the grid. And so our goal for this next farm is to be off grid as much as possible because we understand the importance of it. We just really can't do anything about our current situation because it is what it is, where it is, because that was our research farm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I love hearing that you guys are going to implement renewable energy into your new farm. If there was one thing you could do or will do to reduce energy use and not necessarily offset energy use with solar, but actually reduce how much energy you consume, what do you think it would be? Where's the low-hanging fruit in your farm?
Automation. I think automation would be the lowest fruit that you could gather, because if you look at all the amount of people, automation brings the ability to transplant multiple times if you have to, harvest at a consistent rate, and process that product all in a streamlined format that humans cannot do. So we'd waste a lot of resources, a lot of electricity, a lot of space if we didn't incorporate automation as a piece of our future farms.
How does automation save energy? Because I automatically think, oh, now we have robots and motors and like all these other things. Like, to me, that is using more energy. How does it use less?
You're thinking just power, right? Right now, in our world, we have labor shortages, right? When you have a limited set of resources and your limited resource is labor, you have to look for a solution to solve that problem. Automation is the solving of that problem. I can keep my farm smaller in that aspect, the robot's just moving, and I can continue growing more product in the space that would be where the humans would normally have worked.
So I want to kind of go into that a little bit, because I think that's a really important point for the people who are trying to regulate energy, is that it's not just about energy, right? It's about water, it's about labor, it's about efficiency in general and how we achieve that. And it's, you know, in terms of automating labor, I mean, we're having labor shortages in every sector in our country, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a restaurant or if you're a farm, you're having trouble staffing your people, right? And so I think that's a totally fair thing to say. And, you know, even with farm labor laws, it's really hard to hire people who want to work in a field farm, let alone find people who are skilled enough who can work in a high-tech farm like you guys are operating. And so automating labor is sort of the natural progression of human nature, right? I mean, that's something I love about agricultural engineering. And one of the things I'm most proud of to be an agricultural engineer is that I feel like agriculture was basically the impetus for almost every engineering profession there is, right? Because we had to solve all these problems with about farming. And so we've just developed all this technology around growing crops, storing crops, producing food, getting it to people, right? I mean, a lot of it has been built up around agriculture and farming. And so although automating labor may seem controversial in some circles, it just is what we do. And I think our society at large has been really focused on energy for the last 30 or 40 years. But I always say we're going to solve the energy crisis, right? I mean, we're going to build more renewable energy systems. We're going to have electric cars, right? I mean, we're going to do all these things that is going to solve our energy shortages. But what we can't make up for is water. And we know that farming uses 60% or more of our freshwater resources. So for farming, I really want more focus on water and the benefits of indoor agriculture for that, as well as labor. I mean, we are going to have to feed how many billions of people in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years? And with fewer and fewer people who are farming, we have fewer and fewer people who can feed us. Let's be honest. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, so like one of the things that we decided in our next farm in the Midwest is that water that you were talking about, if we collect the condensate and if we reuse and recondition the water coming off of the tanks after they are exhausted, we have very little water coming into the building for growing that product. We have not closed loop us, but we're very close to closed loop at that point. So now we are not a draw or a challenge for that municipality because we are now basically on our own.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, what do you think the barriers are for reducing energy and water use?
I think the technology is slowly catching up to what we want to do. I look at my first generation of LED lights, how much power they use versus the induction lights I used before then versus the high pressure sodiums that I used before then. And then now the LEDs that I'm getting ready to put into my new farm, how much power they use versus how much output they now give for the same amount of power. And so I think that being such a new industry, technology is doing a huge catch up, and we will get more efficient on using the resources that we have, such as power, by bringing all those engineers that need to be focused on, making the next mousetrap the best way they possibly can and getting us the toys that we need to use and making them more energy efficient.
Awesome. So, Michelle, do you consider indoor agriculture, specifically what you do, indoor production of leafy greens, a competitive or collaborative industry?
I would consider it a competitive industry as of right now. Again, being a new industry with so many players attempting to be number one and trying to gain that commercial acceptance into the market is a challenge. Many of the companies, including mine, feel they have to hold on to that proprietary information they have gathered. We call them painful lessons learned at Living Greens, but until they are well established in the market and have achieved that relevancy beyond niche market. There was a great speaker at Indoor AgCon this year that discussed our industry and where he feels all of the players are sitting right now and where we as an industry, as well as individual companies, need to go. He described our whole industry as a niche market of growers yet, and none of our companies have jumped that chasm into industry-changing entities. I fully agree with them. The next 5-10 years are going to be very eye-opening. 18 years ago, I was defining what indoor growing meant to people, and people were looking at me going, hydro what? When I walked into places. Today, aeroponics and hydroponics are household words. Currently, I think we are in the equivalent of the space race that would happen in the late 60s. Who can get to market get to the market large enough and become a major player and to be profitable. 5 to 10 years from now, I see maybe 5 to 10 players settling into the space and becoming the norm. I think we'll always continue to be challenged with like new innovations and technologies that will aid and help facilitate the technology, and that technology will become more and more economically stable. And at that time, we'll become more of a collaborative than a competitive, because we're now into the market versus just trying to break into that market.
Yeah, it's more mature. You've kind of figured things out, and at least the big things out. That then it's just the fine tuning and helping each other. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, talking about having big companies do what we're marketing, at least right now, as local urban farming. I mean, it just, to me, kind of is in the face of what we're promoting as an industry right now, that, you know, it's locally grown, get to know your farmer, right? We're not like these big conglomerates, like big ag, blah, 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 you know, like they're evil.
Why
do we have to be big?
I'm going to contradict you there, though.
Okay.
Every single speaker that was a big speaker at our indoor AgCon, that our industry convention, was a multi-location trying to become a big farm. Because everybody in this market at this moment feels they have to go big to become profitable, or to become that 1%, 2%, 3% of the market that they need to become profitable and viable for the future for their company. And so they are all saying that we are still local. We're just local in 10 different locations.
Okay.
And each location has its own local radius. Living Greens is going to do the exact same thing. We are going to be in several places in the country in the next 4 years. And in each part of the country, we are choosing a certain radius that we are willing to deliver to, so we can still consider ourselves local.
Interesting. What radius?
1 day's travel by delivery truck. So up to 500 miles is what we're thinking right now. We want to be able to harvest and process in 1 day and be on the shelves of our customers the next. That is our sales model.
Yeah, as opposed to 5 to 7 days to get from Salinas to New York City.
Correct.
Yeah. Or Yuma in the winter up to Faribault, Minnesota, right?
Right. And so
Yeah.
I think all the bigger players have that same concept in mind. Multiple locations in these urban centers, bring the farms to the jobs, bring the farms to the people, if you will, so you can get the farm labor that you do need, and still be local and still be a huge conglomerate.
Do you think it'll be easier to find labor in the city or in these urban markets than out in rural areas?
I do. We advertise as factory work. We don't advertise as farm labor.
Oh, interesting.
You know, my employees are harvesting lettuce, yes, but they are doing a repetitive factory type job. You're at any point in the day, you're either harvesting the lettuce, cleaning the lettuce, prepping it for processing, transplanting lettuce, cleaning the system before you transplant it, seeding lettuce, or you're in the processing room processing it, and you're at stations, very much like a factory would be, that you're in this station for 1, 2, or 3 hours before you move to the next station and do the next task.
Yeah, I mean, that really lives up to that whole concept that Dr. Kozai is known for, sort of conceptualizing in the late 90s, of the plant factory. You guys are doing that.
And I think that a lot of the other big factories and big plant companies are doing the same thing, bringing it in, and the people that are working on your floor, they have a set of tasks, but it's a more of a factory mindset than a farm mindset.
Interesting. Though, I mean, people must be more excited to be working with lettuce plants and living things than, inanimate widget objects.
There is a simplicity in creating widgets, in that the widget never changes.
Right.
any person who says that they have perfect product quality every single day of every single year is lying. And so you do have to train your staff to recognize when there is something wrong, because you're not going to see every head before it gets harvested as a grower. You see the general crop, and you have to make sure they realize that if they do see something wrong, they say something or do something about it. And I guess being that kind of widget, you have a melted part versus a perfectly square part. It's all melted. You have to know when to toss and when to grab the next widget piece and keep making widgets, right?
Right.
It's just a different type of training, and different standards that you have to do, like wear your hairnets. We compare ourselves to the food industry that we have here locally. We have a turkey store, the Genio turkey store. They have to play with dead turkeys. You get to play with plants. Pick one.
I know which one I would pick. Let me just ask you, while we're talking about staffing and this sort of idea of locally grown, I mean, why Minnesota? What makes Minnesota a good place, and specifically where you are, to do this?
Our founder our original CEO and founder got into Faribault. He was from the Twin Cities, and Faribault was attractive because we have a very large highway right next door to us called I-35. We're 30 miles from the Twin Cities. We're 50 miles from Iowa. We're 30 miles from I-90. And so one of the key components of this location is we're far enough out of the cities that we don't have the challenge of city ordinances, like the major metropolitan area. We have all the benefits of being in a town that wants to bring industry to them. And so you have all the incentives of that. And then we're literally 3 blocks away from I-35 that can go north and south all the way around the country if we really wanted to. And that helps logistics immensely.
Especially if you're trying to transport within 500 miles, you have to make sure that there's a way to get there, right?
Yep. So the locations of our farms are going to be very instrumental on, where those key highways are. Where are your logistic hubs? Where are we trying to deliver to? Who are our customers that we want to deliver to? What contracts do we already have? And does our farm being in a closer proximity to them give us an economic edge or not?
How do you predict our industry of indoor agriculture is going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? You were just talking about like sort of how some of these companies are still new, and that over the next 5 to 10 years maybe we'll mature and get to that point of having industry changing entities. But what else do you see evolving? What are you excited to see in the next decade? Are you still going to be doing what you're doing in 10 years?
I'm going to be retired in 10 years.
Oh, there you go.
No,
Congratulations.
That was a joke. I would like to see us succeed and move on to being the best as an industry that we can be. So when you talk to like the Soybean Association or the Corn Association, they talk as a we. We are doing this. We are helping create this product to feed the world. We are, and it's a we scenario. I would like to see our indoor industry, the leafy greens industry, let's just segregate that out for a second, and become more collaborative in the next 10 years, and get to a point where we all understand that baby greens are this type of technology, full greens are this technology, and you have your different technologies, you have your NFTs, you have your deep water, you have your aeroponics, you have whatever media you're growing in, but we all are playing in a very large pond, and we all are only producing a couple drops of water for that pond. Let's get together and chit chat, because frankly, the amount of increases in the produce section, if you do any of the trending, there is more than enough for all of us. So let's just keep moving forward as an industry. Let's start working together and maybe get the legislation to work in our favor, such as organic standards, or one of the hits we keep hitting at Living Greens is every year our premise audit changes and changes and changes because they're trying to catch up to indoor agriculture. And some of the things that are on these lists that you have to now prove compared to a farm that's outside in the dirt, if you will, is kind of not ridiculous. I understand the importance of it, but it's like, really? And you're going to ask me for examples, aren't you?
Well, I would love an example. It sounds fascinating. I love this.
One of the things that I always lose points on in an good agricultural practices audit is that I have water on the floor. Okay. If I was out in Mother Nature and I have a farm field of lettuce, you're telling me that you're not going to pass my farm if I got dirt and water going down my rows.
Why are they marking you for that? Like, what's the concern?
The concern is that disease and algae and other things can start growing on your floor and become a hazard to the food safety part of your farm if you have water on the floor.
I mean, but you're keeping jet fuel off your plants. You're keeping deer out of your field from grazing and shitting on your plants. There you go. That's not a blooper, just so you know. I mean, give me a break.
That's the one I can come up with the most.
No, that's a beautiful example.
Every single time.
Couldn't ask for anything better.
There is no way that you can have 75,000 plants growing at the exact same time in 3 different grow rooms and not have any water anywhere on that floor in 20,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet or whatever I am. It just doesn't happen, you know?
That's amazing. You know, by the way, 75,000 lettuce plants, for a given area, I don't know, an acre or whatever unit area you want to use, how much more lettuce can you grow than a field?
Someone, not me, did the calculation that 2 of my 56-foot systems can produce the same amount of lettuce per year as an acre of lettuce out in California.
2 56-foot systems, so that's the length. So you have a total of 112 feet times some area.
4 feet wide, 10 feet tall. Each of them holds 2,056 heads of romaine lettuce that is rotated on a continuous basis over a certain amount of time that I can't disclose. And that crop rotation with 2 of those systems equals 1 acre of.
Wow. And how much less water do you think you use?
We say 99, just like almost everybody else does.
Because you're recycling your water that you're putting in, right? It's draining back to the system and you're recirculating it?
Yep. We recirculate to a certain amount of time or when the plants tell us. We have found when we need to dump, and we kind of go in front of it, if you will. Say you dump your tanks once a week because on the 8th day, all the plants die. Well, you don't want the plants to die, so you're going to drain that tank before that happens, right? You just
a preventative measure?
A preventative measure, yes.
Wow.
What
a concept in America.
What a concept. And so you find that sweet spot, and then you go in front of it, or the dead spot, whatever you want to call it. and then that's when if you have your practices right, you stop filling that tank when you know you're going to drain it. For example, I have 20,000 plants on only 800 gallons. We're not talking about a lot of water here.
Wow.
What is a typical hot tub? About 800 gallons, right? You know?
Is it?
About
oh my
700.
God. Wow.
So,
thank you for that metric.
You know, so there you go. A swim spa, like a regular swim spa, is 1,400 gallons. I know that one for a fact because I own one. And my tanks in my grow rooms are 800 gallons. And so as I'm swimming in my swim spa, I realize I am in more water than 20,000 plants, 40,000 plants of mine have. Holy Hannah. Yes, you have to know your water chemistry, right? That's that's the difference between, a little bit of difference between hydroponics and aeroponics. Aeroponics, we push that water chemistry to the max. It takes about 2 years for me to train a grower on all the nuances in growing and have them become an intuitive and great grower. I've had the incredible experience of having at least 2, if not 3 really incredible people in my lives that I've trained to become growers, and watching them be and do in the grow rooms and watching them intuitively look, smell, taste, and realize what they're doing is a phenomenal thing. Passing off that knowledge and sharing that knowledge of what needs to be learned to be able to go that deep into your water chemistry and still have a successful product. It doesn't take much to mess up that small of water chemistry.
Oh, I'm sure. Especially at such a low volume, right? You make one wrong, I don't know, slip of the pour, or injection, however you guys do it, whatever you guys do, and you have a completely different chemistry. Yeah, for sure. What do you think is the biggest challenge of growing indoors?
HVAC, as you well know.
Why?
Because you have to have a fundamental understanding of what your plants need, when they need it, and how they need it delivered to them.
Why is it different than irrigation or lighting?
The plant will grow to a light for a certain amount of time, but a plant can't grow to an HVAC system. The HVAC has to come to the plant, right? So if you have this plant, and we're gonna pick a butter lettuce because most people know that butter lettuce has this beautiful whorl. It looks like a rose on the inside, and that rose on the dead center, if that air just stays there stagnant, you are now creating a microclimate in that canopy within those inner leaves, and they can't do anything because this is the whole point of plants, is that they draw up from the roots because they're breathing out of the leaves. If they can't breathe out that moisture and get that moisture moved or wicked away, if you will, from their leaves, they can't absorb anything. So if you do not get that air to the plant when it needs it, how it needs it, you just turned off the plant. You might as well turn off the lights. You might as well turn off the CO2, because that plant ain't growing if you don't have that airflow going to that plant canopy when it needs it.
So do you think humidity is more critical than temperature?
I do. I think that especially for lettuce products, you have your different tolerances with your different lettuces, your icebergs versus your leaf lettuces versus your salanovas versus your romaine and your butter. All of them have different tolerance ranges that they can handle for temperature, but all of them are greater than the humidity range that they can tolerate. They can handle like a 15, 20 degree temperature range and be okay. But if you get over that threshold of humidity, again, you might as well turn off the lights, you might as well turn off the CO2 and go home, because you're not going to have a crop that's what you need it for anyway. Our unique challenge is we are growing full-size product. I am shooting for 6.5, 7 ounces processable product, which means my head has to be almost 10 ounces big, separated from the root before you take off the core. How do you get to that size plant with the conditions you need it to be able to survive that processing, have that thickness? It all comes down to how do you get the proper air to that plant to make sure it gets what it needs.
I have so many thoughts around this, but one is that, you know, we know those curves that have been produced for a lot of different plants where you're looking for the optimization point, right, of light, temperature, and carbon dioxide to maximize yield. But I mean, even just based on what you just said right here, is that the tolerance for temperature might be very large. You know, are we missing an optimization point? Rather than temperature, should we be looking at humidity, or maybe it's vapor pressure deficit? Maybe that higher temperature or that peak temperature where CO2 and light come together is actually representative of a specific relative humidity, which together would really translate into a vapor pressure deficit. Do you think we're missing that?
We do. Yes. And I tend to think in grams of water in the air versus percent. And that's just because that's how I was taught. Old school here. Anytime I see grams of water in my air that's over 10, I get nervous. You know, you need to know what your crop is. You need to know how to grow your crop. Now, if I was growing tomatoes, you probably want like 15 grams of water in the air because you want that humidity for the tomatoes. You know, I am growing a full-size romaine. I need to know what my tolerances are for that romaine lettuce, regardless of what the temperature is, so I don't get the tip burn, I don't get the center rot, I don't get the botrytis, I don't get the slimy centers. and I get the thickness that I need to be able to process it. It's all about, can I process that product? Because if I get a 7-ounce head of lettuce processing, but it's too thin to process, I might as well go fill the dumpster.
And the humidity actually affects the thickness of those leaves?
Of course. Absolutely. Positively. How much more can I say that?
I told you, I love talking to you. I always learn something. You know, so the other comment I wanted to make is, you know, you said if you don't have the humidity right and, you know, the plant has shut off, so you might as well turn the lights off. You might as well turn the CO2 off. What I see a lot, especially with cannabis growers, is that they're so afraid of temperature. They're afraid of heat. And I get it. They have, you know, historically been growing under high pressure sodium lamps, which produce a lot of radiant energy. But, you know, they have really high light levels, greater than 1,000 micromoles. Now they're pushing like 1,500 or 1,800 micromoles. Like, it's crazy. And a CO2 level concentration of like 1,500 parts per million, but they're running at these really low temperatures at like 75 degrees or lower. And, you know, what I try to convince them is that you guys are hitting the, you know, the accelerator over here with CO2 and light, but at the same time, you're hitting the brakes with your temperature. You know, like, you might as well not enrich to 1,500 parts per million because your plant isn't, you know, metabolizing the CO2 that you're giving it. Like, it just doesn't have enough energy to do what you want it to do with all that CO2 and light. So I appreciate you making that comment. It's true for every plant, right?
It is. And if you're going to hit the acceleration, you better know all your variables in that acceleration.
Yeah, because it's not just about the environmental variables, right? Because I'm sure you also have to then compensate for nutrient levels, right, and water, and how your plant responds that way.
And so if you are going to change your acceleration rate, even by 2 to 3 degrees for romaine, for example, you better have a different schedule for your fertilization. You better have a different watering schedule. You better have a different air schedule. And you better have a different temperature schedule that relates to that humidity in those grams of water in the air. Otherwise, you are going to have a very large amount of unusable product very quickly.
Yeah. Do yield and quality go together all the time? Or can you have an increase in yield and less quality, or vice versa?
Yes. You can have you would love to have yield and quality always be one and together, but you don't. Doesn't necessarily always equate. More often than not, they do, though. So
Okay.
if you have very little tip burn, if you have very little botrytis, you have all your powdery mildew has been controlled in the room. Again, if any grower says that they've never had that, they're lying to you, because every grower experiences those challenges. If all those are lined up, that means your humidity and temperature are in spec, which means that your plant is going to grow faster. And as long as you have your watering program set to the right parameters and your root structure, you haven't burned them off by putting too much acid in your tank or something like that, everything is going to respond in the positive manner. So now you have a higher quality plant, and that's going to equal a higher yield, right? Because you don't have to take off any tip burn, you don't have to take off any, anything else.
Yeah.
But there are times that we get a larger product that is a little bit thinner that we can't process. You know, it's the caliper of the thickness of the leaf, you know, how much of that epidermal layer has been laid down because of the different environmental conditions I put through the room.
I mean, it's interesting because for chopped lettuce, you talk a lot about like the thickness and crispness as a quality measure. I mean, I guess it's not just a quality measure, but I mean, do you guys also try to control other qualitative variables such as taste and bricks and things like that? Are you guys trying to make adjustments to those as well?
We do, but I'm going to break down to, like, our biggest seller is Caesar salad, right? Caesar
Okay,
is one of the biggest ones. When have you ever enjoyed a limpy, soggy Caesar salad? It's not. It's all
No.
about the crunch. It's all about the freshness and the flavor profile of that crunch. If I obtain that crunch that everybody seems to enjoy and want and desire in Caesar salad, my bricks is going to be right there with it. I've already married the two together.
Okay.
For me to get the cellular structure to create that, I've also already given it what it needs to get the flavor profile that I need it to get as well.
Well, I've mostly exhausted my questions here. This has been really fun to talk to you. Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm not going to leave with this question, but this is my last sort of official question here. But what do plants crave, Michelle?
To be listened to and get what they're asking for. That's all they want. That's all they crave. They're kind of like teenagers.
But they're nicer to you, right?
Oh, so much more nicer.
Okay.
And luckily they don't have voices, so they can't yell at you.
You didn't listen to what I was saying earlier.
Oh.
Plants talk all the time.
I learned nothing. All right, so I am going to end with a few rapid fire questions for you. Okay, are you ready? I promise they're fun. Okay. Are plants introverts or extroverts?
Extroverts. They scream what they want.
Like teenagers.
Like teenagers.
Okay. Can indoor agriculture feed the world?
Not 100% by itself.
Can it nourish the world?
It can nourish the world. It can supplement the world. But again, going back to the practices, that there's some things that have been developed that indoor agriculture may not be able to overcome. I'm going to talk about your wheat and your corns in the soil. As long as we have some soil that is farmable, I think we'll keep all our cereal grains outside. So therefore, we're not 100% feeding the world.
Yeah.
We're supplementing the world.
Okay. I like it.
So I put that the dirt farmers feed the world. We give all the tasty tidbits that people enjoy eating with that food.
Tasty tidbits. Love it. That's going to be the title of this podcast now.
All right, last question. How much lettuce do you eat every week?
I have a salad a day. By the time I'm done tasting, I'm not allowed to eat in my grow rooms, but by the time myself and my grower Matt walk around and grab, that's one salad in itself by doing all the different tastings. And I tend to eat a salad with lunch as well.
Okay. So 2 salads maybe.
Probably, yeah. One big salad.
Do you know how much salad or how much lettuce the average U.S. consumer eats?
Once a week? Twice a week? Guessing?
I hope so. Let's hope for that.
I mean, if you look at the salad industry and how much it's increasing year over year it's the biggest increasing market in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody has to be eating it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so convenient. It's so nice. I mean, probably one of the hardest parts about making a salad is the dressing. It's nice when the dressing just comes with it.
Not necessary for myself to eat salad, but I see why others have to do so. If you're putting salad dressing on salad, you're not tasting the lettuce. But that's just my personal opinion.
I agree. Or the tomatoes or the cucumbers or the nuts or whatever other goodies you've put on it, right?
Well, thank you, Michelle. This was really fun. I promise I did learn a lot, even though I didn't get one of the major takeaways that lettuce will scream at you. And you just have to listen for their little screams. 75,000 plants in one room screaming at me, though. I mean, I feel deaf already. So.
Yep. You always know when you walk in the room if something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you know you got yourself a good grower.
Well, that's what makes you a good grower, is that you're paying attention. So, well, thank you so much, Michelle. This has been fun, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone. This has been What Plants Crave with Michelle Keller, who is the head grower of Living Greens. Thanks, Michelle. Thank you.
That was Dr. Nadia Sabeh interviewing Michelle Keller of Living Greens Farm for our series What Plants Crave. We will be taking a break from episodes next Tuesday, but we'll be back in the new year. I'm Dana Swadan, and this has been The Doctor is In with Dr. Nadia Sabeh. Please stay safe, enjoy your holidays, and as always, thank you for listening.